When you think of core or ab training, what do you think of? You probably think of crunches, sit-ups, leg raises. But what if I told you that those aren't the best way to train the core? While dynamic ab exercises like these do have their place, if you want to build a strong, functional, and athletic core, you want to prioritize static core exercises or exercises that build core stability to build the core. Believe it or not, the primary function of the core is not to do freaking sit-ups. I mean, when in real life are you doing this? The primary function of the core is actually to stabilize the body for upper and lower extremity movement, which is why it's so important to improve core stability. You may be wondering what even is core stability, or at least you're wondering what the specific definition of core stability is. Core stability can be defined as the ability to control the position and motion of the trunk over the pelvis to allow optimum production, transfer, and control force and motion to the terminal segment in integrated athletic activities. Most sports skills involve a force that can disrupt the balance of the body generated from the movement of a limb. When hitting a tennis ball, swinging a bat, or kicking a soccer ball, the torque and angular momentum of the limb will tend to rotate the body in opposition to the limb of movement. In order to provide a solid base from which to generate high limb forces or torques and maintain accuracy, the core muscles must maintain a stable spine. So essentially, having a stable core is so important for force production. And this will apply to either sports skills like I mentioned, or even if you're a typical lifter, as it will allow you to be able to produce more force in your compound lifts, which will obviously lead to you being stronger and building more muscle. Having a weak core is like jumping from sand versus jumping from concrete. It'll be much harder to generate force and jump high from sand, while having a solid base to jump from like concrete will be far easier to generate force and obviously jump higher. So now that you know what core stability is and why it's so important, I'll be giving you a simple step-by-step guide on how to build core stability. Also, if you don't know who I am, my name is Rios. I have a Bachelor's of Science in Exercise Science. And in this video, I'll be giving you a step-by-step guide on how to build a strong core. Before we get started with the video, if you're looking to build an aesthetic physique, be sure to check out my 90-day aesthetic body blueprint. This takes all the guesswork out of achieving your dream physique. But if you're more focused on athletic performance, be sure to check out my 120-day peak athleticism package. Both of these will be in the description. The first tip to build a stable core has to be the easiest and most slept on way to build a stable core, and is to prioritize heavy compound movements. Although I will get into direct core work later, the direct core work should be in addition to prioritizing ground-based free weight exercises. Research indicates that many traditional resistance training exercises performed both bilaterally and unilaterally with barbells and dumbbells are excellent training options for developing core strength and stability, as well as maximizing overall strength. The great thing about ground-based free weight exercises is that they stimulate neuromuscular recruitment patterns to ensure a stable spine, while also allowing for efficient and powerful movement, which is obviously very different from stupid ass machines. As with machines, you don't actively have to stabilize your spine, which is why if you want to increase sports performance and improve core stability, it would make sense to de-emphasize stupid machines and emphasize ground-based free weight exercises. The reason why I love ground-based free weight exercises so much for building the core is because you're using the core in the most realistic way possible, as there's a combination of both isometric actions and dynamic functions. For example, in something like a plank, you're only using isometric actions to stabilize the spine, but you're not generating force. And while in something like a heavy squat, you're using isometric actions to stabilize the spine and you're generating force. Think about it, in real life and in sports skills, you're not just stabilizing the spine for the sake of stabilizing the spine. You're stabilizing the spine to generate force, which is why my number one tip to build an athletic functional core is to make sure you're prioritizing ground-based free weight exercises. I know I just went over how great ground-based free weight exercises are, and honestly, you could build a pretty stable core by just doing these exercises. But if you're someone who wants to build a stronger core and add in some extra core stability work, adding in some direct core stability work with the ground-based free weight exercises is a great way to do it. In order to build a strong, stable core, you want to think of movements and not muscles. This is why bodybuilders have cinnamon stick weak-ass cores, because they prioritize developing the abs versus working on the movements of the trunk to stabilize the spine. In order to get complete core development, you want to think about being able to resist the functional movements of the trunk, which includes trunk flexion, trunk extension, trunk lateral flexion, and trunk rotation. While there are many core exercises that resist multiple movements, the easiest way to ensure complete core stability is just to make sure you hit all of these movements. So the first exercise you should include is some sort of anti-extension exercise or an exercise that resists trunk extension. Some examples are a dead bug, leg raise, and ab wheel rollouts. An easy way to think of these exercises is that these exercises will tend to want to round your back. So your goal is obviously to resist this and maintain a neutral spine. The next exercise you want to include is an anti-rotation exercise or an exercise that resists rotation. This one has to be the most important to include in my opinion. And the reason why is because ground-based free weight exercises, although they work on core stability really well, they don't work on anti-rotation very well, which is why I and lots of top athletes prioritize anti-rotation core stability, as that's typically a weak point for most people because again, it's not hit very well in ground-based free weight exercises. There are a lot of great anti-rotation exercises, but my favorite has to be some sort of Pavlov press variation. I really like this one because it's easy to progress, and you're able to do this one standing and in an athletic stance that's more sport specific. You can either hold this position with your arms extended or do it in a more dynamic way where you do reps, with the goal obviously being to resist the cable and not letting your trunk rotate. And the next exercise you should include is an anti-lateral flexion exercise, or an exercise where you're resisting bending over to the side. A very popular example is a side plank, but my favorite anti-lateral flexion exercise has to be a unilateral weighted carry. The reason why I prefer this one over the side bending one is because it's more dynamic, and again, you're in a more realistic sport specific position. There is no best carry. You can do a suitcase carry, a unilateral front loaded carry, or even an overhead carry. But the goal of all of these, including the side plank, is to maintain a neutral spine and not allow your trunk to bend over to the side. And the last exercise you should include is an anti-flexion exercise. I would prioritize the first 3 anti-movements, but it's still important to make sure that you work on anti-flexion as well. Most athletes will prioritize anti-extension, anti-lateral flexion, and anti-rotation. And this is because anti-flexion is actually hit pretty well in squats and deadlifts, and it's very rare in sports that you'd be hit from behind. Some examples of anti-flexion exercises are a back extension bench hold, or if you don't have access to a back extension bench, you can just hold a Superman position. And those exercises will help you resist motion in all the functional trunk movements. And while those are great exercises, real life and sports don't just involve one kind of stability. So it's important to add in some dynamic core stability exercises as well. And while I did mention unilateral weighted carries, you should also incorporate bilateral weighted carries as well. Weighted carries have to be one of my favorite exercises to build core strength, as not only does it heavily work on anti-flexion and anti-extension, but even symmetrical carries hit anti-rotation and anti-lateral flexion, as you have to stop your body from swaying to the side or tilting. Unlike most resistance exercises, weighted carries do force your body to move asymmetrically despite seeming like a symmetrical exercise overall. At any individual point in the exercise, your body is in an asymmetrical position, as one leg is stepping forward while the other is holding your weight up. And your torso is also swaying side to side just as it does while you're walking. So make sure you're frequently incorporating weighted carries into your core stability routine as well. Now onto the dosage, because it doesn't matter if you know the correct exercises. If you're not doing the correct dosage, then you won't be getting as much out of the exercises as you could be. You should be performing all these exercises for about 3 to 5 sets each session, with 1 minute rest in between each set. And for best results, do them 2 to 3 times per week. In exercises that involve reps like the Pavlov press or an ab wheel rollout, you should shoot for 10 to 20 reps, and once you're able to do 20 reps for 3 sets, increase the intensity. And for exercises with constant holds like a plank or carries, you should hold these exercises for 20 to 60 seconds and try and go up by 10 seconds each week. And once you're able to hold for 60 seconds for 3 sets, increase the intensity. So that's how you build a stable core to help you be a beast in your respective sport, or to help you lift more weight at the gym so you can build more muscle and get stronger. While I did mention that I think static ab exercises are far more important than dynamic ab exercises, dynamic ab exercises are still very important for complete core development and for hypertrophy of the abs to build an aesthetic six-pack. And I actually made a video that goes over the only 4 dynamic ab exercises that you need to do this.